name's host Eric. We're quite a bit done today in terms of painting at the other house, but after I've come home, haven't really got anything done, but it's fine. I mean, yeah, I'd like to go to bed. I'd like to go to sleep, is ASAP. But here I am, up hours on end, still. I don't know how many hours I devoted today, but at least like the last hour and a half, 2 hours, something, have I devoted to going over all of this doctor stuff in my head. All right, there. And the reason I've been doing it is because it's so incredibly informative regarding how fucked up our status quo is, the implicit problems with the way things are done. For example, this is really an issue of consent, right? Like, I don't want to consent to various medical procedures, including getting my blood pressure taken, being measured how tall I am, being weighed, having my temperature taken, having blood tests done, etc. I don't want to consent to any of those procedures, right? Now, because Dr. Ingram is a psychiatrist, he doesn't do those kind of procedures, He's not expecting to do physical examinations and blood tests and such when he's working with patients. He's working with them on drugs that you prescribe predicated on self-reporting, So, so the thing is, it would be understandable if I were asking him to prescribe the kind of drug that first needs a diagnosis. So doctors do a few different things, right? There are doctors who do surgeries to repair failing parts of the body. There are doctors who deal with injuries. There are doctors who prescribe drugs based on self-reporting, like psychiatrists. And there are doctors who take courses of action predicated on empirical test results. Your general practitioners, often, and especially your nurse practitioners, hi, Chief, you've got a lot of ESTJs involved in the mix, right? So for them, doing a good job of practicing medicine is testing a patient for every possible thing to make sure you have a full and complete workup on them and a full complete assessment, right? Of course, if I want to get prescribed albuterol, which is my inhaler that I use sometimes when I'm feeling wheezy, the only way a doctor ever prescribes albuterol is based on the patient's reporting of wheeziness or, difficulty breathing at sometimes. The doctor doesn't expect them to be having an asthma attack in front of them before the doctor's willing to prescribe albuterol, right? There's no way to prescribe albuterol to people who need it if you require empirical proof that they need it, because it's not that kind of thing, right? Viagra, same kind of thing, right? It gets prescribed predicated on self-reporting. And regardless of what other tests or things the doctor does, at the end of the day, the patient gets prescribed Viagra because they are reporting a need for it, or that it improves their sex or something in some way that is significant to them and enough to be considered a health matter, right? So in neither of those instances will any part of the prescription process actually be a thing that follows data gathering processes. Instead, those data gathering processes, namely blood tests, all these other tests, right? They're there to find some explanation for the sexual dysfunction. Except that's not what I'm going to the doctor for. I'm not going for a diagnosis, right? I have the diagnosis. I know what it is. I'm telling the doctor to prescribe me the drug that is indicated for that diagnosis. The doctor is saying, no, I want to diagnose something else. The point is, even if there is something else to diagnose, that's not your job here, right? It's like if I go in for a broken arm, they set my arm. They don't run a bunch of tests to make sure my broken arm isn't actually liver disease. Well, gee, you have fun masturbating. Even though I've had asthma my entire life, from the time I've had a Medi-Cal, I had to make an appointment and see a GP before they would refill a script for inhaler. Right, and why? Why? Yes, I'm talking about my doctor. The thing is, I don't need Viagra, but all I have to do is stop taking my Wellbutrin, and I'm perfectly capable. But the Wellbutrin totally kills my sex drive. So if I'm going to keep taking the Wellbutrin, I need Viagra. Regardless, when I stop taking the Wellbutrin, I want Viagra because I realized when I took it, like, oh, this makes sex better. It improves my sex life, my relationship with my wife, my mental health, my self-concept, a bunch of other stuff, right? Well, yeah, I'm still talking about this concept because the more I think about it, the more revelatory it is about what's wrong with the existing system, right? Like, in tonight's new realization is that what the doctor is trying to do is sidestep my consent objections so that somebody else is responsible for holding the solution hostage until I agree to be subjected to medical procedures I wouldn't otherwise consent to. So what I'm talking about in general is the way that doctors, unlike everything else and every other kind of like service provider, that they will hold what you're actually there for and need from them hostage until you agree to buy multiple products you don't want. It is a practice that is spitting in the eye of consent, you know? What my doctor does is say, well, look, you don't want to consent to this, but if I refuse to give it to you, you'll go to a general practitioner and they won't give it to you either until you consent to a bunch of unwanted medical procedures. And the thing is, that would be acceptable if this were a foreseeable but non-intentional outcome. So in other words, if he were genuinely just a stickler for the jurisdictional boundaries of psychiatry and he was going to maintain that firm stance on that, regardless of what happened, well, then it's a foreseeable but not intentional outcome of his prerogative. And there's not much I can say about it. However, that's not the case here because, in fact, while it might be true that albuterol is normally prescribed by a general practitioner, it is absolutely not true that for a person receiving antidepressants from a psychiatrist, the psychiatrist normally outsources the Viagra prescription to somebody else. That's a bald-faced lie. Accordingly, we know that it's not a foreseeable but unintentional outcome that he's lying about his justifications because he used the same justification for both drugs, albuterol, Viagra. It's only defensible in one case, which means it's just an excuse he's using to not help me. What is exactly his ulterior motive for not helping me? I have a theory about it. I think he's paternalistically got it in his head that he knows what's best for me and can predict outcomes of him making it difficult for me to go through life without a general practitioner and predict that those outcomes are good, etc. But here's the thing. I mean, I think he just got trapped in the classic utilitarianist self-delusion that the ends justify the means, you know? But I have a couple other possibilities. Other possibility one, he's just lazy and wants to do as little work as possible for the money. Seems unlikely, but possible. Possibility number two, he doesn't like me and wants me to quit being his patient so he doesn't have to fire me. So he's going to make it as difficult as possible for me to continue being his patient by forcing me to have multiple doctors at twice the expense, etc. Right? But I think it's well-intentioned hubris, right? He so overestimates the superiority of his judgment that in a brazen act of ontological imperialism, he thinks it's fine to lie to me and be paternalistic and that he can predict all the outcomes, and therefore, since it's going to have good outcomes for me to have a general practitioner, that he's justified in doing this shit. Well, in fact, it's not going to have good outcomes, right? The thing is, he's told us to go to brick and mortar doctors on 3 occasions in the past for Rachel. On none of those occasions was the doctor any help at all. It was just a waste of time and money. Right. So the thing is this: I have it, but that's what I'm arguing with him about, because he pulls this thing where it's like I asked him to prescribe me albuterol because I'd run out of my albuterol, and he said, "Okay, I'll prescribe it this once, but I'm not going to prescribe it again." I didn't think I could win that argument in that instance because it is true that generally one doesn't get albuterol from a psychiatrist and one generally gets it from a general practitioner. That's not a good reason to prefer getting it from one, but it is true, and I just didn't think I could win the argument, so I didn't push back. I was like, okay, well, I'll just go without albuterol, I guess. But then he fucked up badly, right? Because he prescribed me Wellbutrin. I messaged him shortly after he prescribed it, within like a week, saying, this stuff seems to be working great, but there's one big problem, right? One big side effect. It completely kills my sex drive. So the thing is, he ignored that. Then when I did his job and suggested Viagra, he told me the same thing he said for albuterol. He said, oh, that you have to get that from a general practitioner. Except he was being sloppy, lazy, complacent, or whatever, didn't think it through. And I guess, imagine he just slipped it by me or something, but accordingly, now he's in trouble. Now he's going to have to explain himself, and he won't be able to. Because the other ammunition I have is this. The other ammunition I have is that so after he tried to tell me to go to a general practitioner, and then after I replied to that, and then his reply to that accusing me of being disrespectful in some fashion, I got help from D2, who shared with me some very relevant scholarly articles. So when I meet with him, I'll be able to say, so, okay, I'm assuming you aren't aware of this particular case study of this patient who has exactly my situation, had no sexual dysfunction before Wellbutrin, then took Wellbutrin, and suddenly reported sexual dysfunction. And the treatment the psychiatrist prescribed for him was Viagra, And it worked, and the scholarly journal is about that case study. It even posits reasons why he might experience those side effects. What's scary in this article is that it's posited for that gentleman that something in the Wellbutrin permanently altered his brain chemistry so that he's lost the functionality potentially entirely, even when he's not on Wellbutrin. Now, you did not alert me to this extremely relevant, extremely important possible side effect of Wellbutrin at all. Were you unaware of it? I'm guessing you hadn't read this article from Clinical Psychiatry, is the name of the journal. And then I have this other article over here, which states that previously thought positive correlations between adding Wellbutrin to Viagra as a way to improve sexual dysfunction treatment have proved specious. The methodologies were bad, and in fact, the link is tenuous at best. I'm assuming you also hadn't seen this scholarly article. Perhaps you're not keeping up to date. Thirdly, I have another scholarly article that would seem to, I don't fully understand, but would seem to present some possible mechanisms by which Wellbutrin might result in the side effects I have articulated, having something to do with parasympathetic and sympathetic elements being elevated, etc. You're the psychiatrist. Perhaps you could understand it a little bit better than me. I may be off in what is expressed. I mean, that's my quick understanding of it, right? So here's where we're at, Dr. Ingram. You prescribed me Wellbutrin. I did my job as a patient. I said, here's a side effect. You didn't answer. I did your job as a doctor. I proposed Viagra. You tried to shuffle me off to some nurse practitioner like I'm in an HMO. So I said, that's bullshit. Because obviously in either of those instances, you could have chose to do your job, which would have looked like, oh, let's make an appointment to discuss it. Or, that's an odd side effect. Maybe we should try a different antidepressant. Or any number of things that a psychiatrist would do when his patient talks to the psychiatrist about a side effect. So you did not do your job at any point. Instead, you tried to make me pay somebody else to do your job. At that point, I continued to do your job since you obviously weren't doing it. And I found these scholarly articles that are extraordinarily relevant to the situation that, based on what you've told me so far, you apparently have never read before or encountered or were unaware. If you were aware of them, had read them, then I guess you purposely chose to ignore this highly relevant data and cast and disparage my claims, even though you knew they were legitimate, which seems, I don't know what it is, right? Regardless, how do you think this would play in your medical ethics class back at psychiatrist school? If this were a case study, what would you comment upon this case study? What did the doctor do wrong here? Well, I can tell you what he did wrong. He displayed a stunningly cavalier attitude towards the only meaningful data relevant to the situation, namely my self-reporting. After all, he's not in the bedroom watching me and Rachel fuck or fail to. Number two, he displayed a shockingly cavalier attitude toward my actual mental health, actual needs, what's actually good for me, what would actually help me, my interests. And then thirdly, he displayed a remarkably cavalier attitude toward my money. I'm already paying somebody to prescribe this drug for me, him. And he wanted me to have an additional doctor who no doubt like him would be like, well, first you got to go through this $2,400 full assessment package that I must have before I do any doctoring, regardless of whether you want any of these things done. So, I think it's going to be difficult for him to to effectively respond to all this, I'm also going to point out that he's coming from a place of shocking entitlement and no, not with Wellbutrin, actually. The general consensus is that Wellbutrin of all the antidepressants is least likely to cause those kinds of side effects. In fact, it's the antidepressant that psychiatrists prescribe in order to avoid those kind of side effects when somebody complains about them. But different people react differently to different drugs. And, there's an article that highlights a specific case study of an individual who just exactly the same kind of situation as me, right? So, anyway, I think the reason he said, I don't think it links to the Wellbutrin is because he realized he had to say that at that point, right? Otherwise, it's clearly his responsibility. So that might have something to do with it as well. I don't know if she is or not. I invited her to watch a movie with me tonight, but she was kind of crashing out. You hate meds? I mean, I don't hate meds. I hate, the hero in this whole equation is Big Pharma. Pharmacology does excellent work. There are shit tons of incredibly valuable and important drugs out there that lots of people need for lots of different drugs, Rachel seriously needs, or her life would be basically destroyed if she didn't have this unique combination of olanzapine, Prozac, and Klonopin that kicks her bipolar mania directly into full remission and she's completely sane. In an earlier time period, she would just be in a mental asylum somewhere. In an earlier age, somebody who's getting older like me, 53, who's still perfectly capable, but, I guess had probably gotten slowly less virile over time. I hadn't really noticed it that much, but once I tried Viagra, I was like, this is what it feels like to be virile, So, should a man be able to get Viagra simply because it's good for his mental health, self-concept, his marriage, his relationship? That is it acceptable for him to get Viagra simply because he's feeling self-esteem issues because he's getting older and less effective than he was? Or, like what's the standard you have to meet, for fuck's sake? Nobody should have to do anything more. No man should have to do anything more than say, I want Viagra to get it. There doesn't need to be any gatekeepers between the drug and me. That's the problem. Big Pharma is not the problem. Pharmacology is great. It's a miracle worker that works miracles. Doctors are the problem because one of their jobs is to get between you and the drugs you want and need, right? To make sure that you legitimately need it or something. But the problem is there are only some kinds of drugs that need a gatekeeper, even conceivably, right? Like abusable drugs conceivably could use a gatekeeper. It's probably a good idea that you can't buy fentanyl over the counter. You could make the argument that it's good there's a gatekeeper for Adderall. I don't think it's good, but you could make the argument. You cannot make any kind of argument that it's a good thing to have a gatekeeper for albuterol, Viagra, or like gabapentin. It's ridiculous. Rachel shouldn't need a gatekeeper probably for, say, Prozac and olanzapine because she needs them for her mental health, but they're not abusable drugs. They're not fun in any sense. Nobody's going to go, oh, I want to take a bunch of albuterol because there's nothing fun about it. It's purely a solution to a short-term problem that needs an immediate solution. The idea that anybody is served by making somebody with asthma jump through more hoops and work harder to get a rescue inhaler is completely fucking insane. It's completely losing the forest for the trees, right? And making what helps the patient and what the patient wants the absolute lowest priority of all. Because if you sometimes use or feel as though you need a rescue inhaler, then it might be critical for you to be able to get it on short notice. Even if it's not, there's no reason to make it extra expensive and require you to get permission from somebody else to have a rescue inhaler. It's insane. I look like somebody. Is this a celebrity? I'm not a celebrity. I'm in this TV show. It's called Talking with Famous People. It's the greatest television show of all time. I do not play Fortnite. Sometimes I rock, sometimes I roll, sometimes I do neither. So, the takeaway from this is doctors play a number of roles, gatekeeper among them, but they've lost sight of the forest for the trees. So, they're so accustomed to this status quo of procedural buttfuckery that they're unaware of what's going on even. It's like Dr. Ingram, who only takes cash patients, rich cash patients presumably, doesn't take any insurance. No doubt his other patients are so rich, they not only have a private psychiatrist, they've got a private general practitioner and a private podiatrist and a private proctologist, and they can afford all that. And Dr. Ingram is so lost in a fog of being a rich doctor that he doesn't even think twice about saying, I'm going to hold the solution hostage until you allow yourself to be subjected to medical procedures that you would not otherwise consent to if they weren't holding something you actually want and need hostage. Ergo, the whole field needs to be roundly condemned. You know, my experience with doctors the last, let's call it 5 years, a little more, has made me distrust the field so deeply. I've realized 3 kinds of people or institutions that enjoy harmful and, well, not necessarily harmful, but absolute power disparities. Those are cops, judges, and / prosecutors, and doctors. The thing about the cops, judges, and prosecutors thing is, unless you encounter a corrupt and disingenuous cop who plants evidence and stuff, which definitely does happen, but if you don't encounter that, then you can avoid being subject to the power differential and arbitrariness of cops, prosecutors, judges by simply not breaking the law and getting caught up in criminality, right? But the doctors, they are perhaps the worst of all because they genuinely believe, at least the cops know, they aren't, what they're doing isn't necessarily good for the criminal, it's good for the rest of us because criminals need to be caught and arrested and punished and stuff. The judges and the prosecutors know that court is an accountability forum, and judges need to have that kind of autocratic power in court because they need to compel obedience from the various parties they're in. Again, they're there because they got into some kind of trouble, probably. Occasionally, innocent people get mixed up in it, and certainly there are corrupt cops and stuff. But barring those exceptions, good behavior should allow you to avoid being on the wrong end of those power disparities. Doctors, on the other hand, don't think they're doing the dirty work of society, like cops and judges and prosecutors. They think they're saints who help people. They don't even think of their power disparity as being such. They don't feel any responsibility that goes along with that power disparity. And if you, in any way, shape, or form, approach them in a fashion that suggests you don't respect their absolute power in this relationship, they don't want anything to do with you. In those 5 years, I've dealt with Mercy Medical Center, a purported medical center that filled with nothing but shitbags, a group of people who had failed to treat Rachel for 10 years while forcing her non-consensually to undergo cannabis addiction, like group therapy, instead of actually prescribing the drug combination that would fix her bipolar. Why? She was a cash cow. They needed her to keep coming back for more procedures and stuff so they could continue charging the insurance company. They didn't care about her at all. There was active collusion between those medical professionals and Rachel's narcissistic mother to team up and use a bunch of degrading and completely abusive, like, discipline techniques with Rachel that fundamentally dehumanized her and ignored everything she said and everything that was important to her, right? So, of course, once she got with me, I went and, brought the fiery sword of truth and hacked into them for as long as I possibly could, then reported them to state boards and shit. And once they realized they didn't have any paperwork proving that Rachel had consented to this or that or the other thing, boy, were they in a fucking panic. But remember, if somebody like me hadn't stepped in and forced accountability by holding their bad behavior in front of their face, by highlighting their malfeasance, ineptitude, and fundamental wickedness, it would have gone on forever. When I was dealing with my dad, first he goes to the urgent care. The doctor there tries to tell me this EKG that she's pointing to indicates that my dad desperately needs to go to the emergency room. I ask her, well, what exactly does it say? Like, which of this part of this EKG says, oh, he's about to have a heart attack? Or where can we see the indication that it's an actual emergency? What did the doctor do? She got upset, told me I should just trust her medical expertise, that she was the expert, and this is her informed medical opinion. In other words, she lied to me. She said the EKG indicated a pending emergency, but it didn't. When I asked her to tell me how and where and what the mechanism by which it indicated this was, not in great detail, in some detail, she became infuriated that I had challenged her infallible wisdom by expecting her to explain herself. When I then took my dad to the doctor at Kaiser for his depression, and I told the doctor what I knew to be the case, my dad needs a really good night's sleep, prescribe him Klonopin. She was appalled that I would have a suggestion or opinion about that. So that's not how I practice medicine. Right, because you don't care about the patient. You don't think that the data that they have, which is by far the most relevant and salient data, is relevant or salient to anything. You have your habits and you expect to be allowed to do them with grateful acquiescence and no pushback. And you so often get that you look shocked, almost afraid when somebody comes in and doesn't treat you as though you had some kind of infallible vision, even though you're a fucking retard. When I was dealing with my mom, right? She had been lost by Arcadia Methodist Hospital. The nursing home, for reasons that aren't exactly clear, got a bug up their ass and sent her to Arcadia Methodist Hospital. And Arcadia Methodist Hospital lost her. And we called them and said, "Where is she? Oh, we want to go visit her. We know she's there." They told us they transported her there. We said, "Oh, no, we don't have her." Later on, they found her, okay? It was then that Arcadia Methodist called me and said, your mom's a Kaiser patient. They need her over there in Kaiser. So can we get your approval to transfer her over there? I said, "Okay, sure. That's what needs to be done, I guess." And then a little while later, a doctor from Kaiser called me. To do what? To scold me for approving the transfer of my mother to Kaiser because it was going to cost them money. Of course, Arcadia Methodist had lied to me, or at least implied deceptively that if we want to get this thing paid for, it needs to be provided by Kaiser. That was not the case, right? And that, in fact, this was a procedural thing that Kaiser was requesting. They need her over there, right? So I said, "Well, if that's what they need, okay, fine, Arcadia Methodist is closer, but if she's a Kaiser patient and that means she needs to go to a Kaiser hospital, that makes sort of sense to me, I guess, so send her there." Turns out she didn't have to be sent there, and the Kaiser was absolutely furious that I had sent her there. A doctor called, a medical doctor called, who at some point clarified that he was an insurance doctor, whatever that means, to yell at me for having believed Arcadia Methodist lies. In other words, for having shoved off my mother onto their care and responsibility rather than leaving her where she was. Now, which of these little nests of medical professionals, Arcadia Methodist Hospital, Kaiser Permanente Hospital, and the doctors there, which of them showed a shred of concern for the patient? None of them. They all were prioritizing anything but and everything but the patient, right? So the thing is, you want in life in general to have as few dealings with cops and judges and prosecutors as possible. Ideally, zero. You might have a couple dealings with them, but hopefully they're short and they're small matters and you can move away from it. Sure, you might want to deal with cops when you're the victim of a crime, but you know what I mean. And the same is true for doctors. You want to engage as few of them as possible for as little time as possible. Because, after all, you're always going to be at a structural disadvantage when you're dealing with one of these parties that enjoys a vast power disparity. Cops, the power disparity is such that if they tell you, put on handcuffs, we're locking you in a cage, you have no choice but to comply, right? Judges and prosecutor can threaten to prosecute you for enough crimes to send you to jail for life, even if you just committed shoplifting, by just threatening to overcharge you if you don't plead guilty to grand theft or something. So prosecutors have a lot of discretionary power, and you have none comparatively, right? Doctors are the same way, and accordingly, you should avoid them as much as possible. You should spend as little time as possible dealing with doctors, medical professionals of any sort, because you know that for every one useful thing that they do for you, they're going to require you to first submit to 10 useless things. After all, you're not paying for it, presumably the insurance company is paying for it. Therefore, no one is. So we might as well do as many things to you as we can. After all, you're a revenue stream. That's what you are, not a person. You're not deafened, Anthony. You are just deaf DEF, like Def Jam, you know. Anthony, clap your hands and see if there's any sound. I thought you were going to tell Big Old Dog you can see his present. Who's Big Old Dog? Oh, there's Big Old Dog. He said it's Big Old Dig. Santa gave me a Big Johnson this Christmas. Well, you know, if it's something that he can give to you, technically that's called a dildo. You can't unscrew your micro and replace it. It's not going to work. But you know, we all hate ourselves, so that's fine. God knows I do. I hate myself in so many ways. I hate myself every day. I hate myself because I suck. I'm on this real kick of hating myself over here. And I like to advocate that, you know, hey friends, it's host Eric here on behalf of your mental well-being. Don't forget, it's always a good day to hate yourself. Surely you can think of some flaws, some shortcomings, some bad behavior of your own in the past. And every time you do, remember, say, I hate myself. Keep doing this for months and months and months. And eventually you become fully actualized like me. You know, like this is the kind of shit that I'm actually going through that I talked to many prescribed Wellbutrin for. I didn't even ask for, I wasn't looking for an antidepressant prescription. I didn't ask for one, and I didn't self-identify as depressed. I just indicated that I have these negative self-talk habits. It's kind of like Tourette's almost, you know? Of course, he didn't provide much information about Wellbutrin. I didn't think much about it because it's like, I just perceive things as I'm not asking him to stretch his legs at all, so there shouldn't be any problems here, you know? Like, I never thought to myself, oh, wow, hopefully Dr. Ingram will be one of those like Michael Jackson doctors who just prescribe you whatever you want. I'll ask him for ketamine, and prescription meth. And I never even considered pushing any boundaries because I only do that kind of stuff if and when I already know I can win the argument. So, like, that's why I didn't push back with the Albuterol, right? I knew I couldn't win the argument because of the foreseeability, intentionality thing. But, you know, it's like if he were legitimately just enforcing a jurisdictional strictness that is genuinely significant to him, then that's his prerogative and there's nothing I can do about it, right? Well, when he fucked up, then now he can no longer claim that the outcomes here are foreseeable but unintentional result of his jurisdictional strictness. That's obviously bullshit, so. But, you know, as I've been thinking about this, I'm recounting to myself the various encounters with doctors we had. He referred Rachel to 3 different, I mean, he told us to go see real life doctors to 3 different occasions. We saw a nurse practitioner, complete, intuition free, you know, waste of resources, which was just burn through resources. She'd have to do a color analysis to agree that an apple is red. The second one we went to was this emergency room doctor who was very interested in Rachel while he had a hunch that he was trying to either validate or falsify. As soon as it turned out that his idea of what was happening was wrong, he completely lost interest in her and provided her no further service. We went to a neurologist who gave us orders and did not explain himself at all. In other words, told us what to do, but not why. And didn't seem to think we needed any information except commands from him. Obviously, nobody who's intelligent is going to think that doctor's opinion is worth anything because he didn't warrant it with anything. It turned out he was right, but that didn't matter because he didn't care about the patients, right? He spent no time trying to find out how he could doctor us successfully, that what our criteria for success was, how we would be convinced, or if we needed to be convinced. His attitude was, I said it, I'm the doctor, you do it. I give commands, you obey them, that's how it works. So, given that Dr. Ingram himself has referred us to 3 different doctors, none of whom were helpful at all, and all of whom cost money, there's no reason he should think it's going to be any different this time. Certainly, there's no reason for me to think it's going to be any different this time. I tell you what, go spend $1,500, $2,000 on a general practitioner. If they again prove useless, come back here, make another appointment, spend another $400 or whatever, and I'll consider prescribing you back. That's not how shit goes. Now, I understand the doctors can't have a single priority that functions as a criterion to determine what they ought to do. They have a number of different priorities they have to keep in mind. They have to be aware of when a patient wants something that's bad for them. In other words, oh, this guy's a super hardcore drug addict. His back doesn't hurt. He's just trying to get me to prescribe opiates, right? Like that kind of thing. Doctors have to do some of that, have to be aware of that kind of thing. But obviously, they also have to I guess they try to uphold these procedural norms. I don't know. I know for this for a fact that if Dr. Ingram wanted some drug, I don't know if he can prescribe it to himself, but he just asked a doctor friend, hey, can you write me a script for me? And the doctor friend certainly wouldn't make him jump through any hoops. Even if he did, Dr. Ingram is rich. He's got plenty of money. After all, he only takes rich cash patients. So it wouldn't be a problem for him to just shell out another indefinite number of $1,000 to, jump through an uncertain number of hoops before the medical professional is willing to do the thing you're actually there for. That wouldn't happen to him. He'd be able to pay for it if it did, no problem. And he's just operating from this fog of privilege where he thinks it's fine to just send people out to waste money on garbage. But the key takeaway here is that the medical profession does not respect consent. They actively reject the spirit of consent and, are fine with violating the letter of consent if they think they can get away with it. And that's appalling, It should not be okay for you to withhold treatment on my broken arm until I agree to buy a bunch of blood tests, smallpox tests. Well, we're not entirely sure it's a broken arm. We haven't run every conceivable test. And until we do, I'm not going to treat a broken arm. After all, We don't know what else you might have. Well, this is one last bastion of sanity. You can go to the dentist and just get what you want then. Oh, no. Hey, I'd like to get my teeth fixed. Well, you know what I'd like you to do? I'd like you to go to a general practitioner and get tested for diabetes. And then this same dentist had the gall to expect me to start the process that day, shell out $2,500 for this shapy thing. I said, but what if I have diabetes? Because you just explained how it's a big deal if I have diabetes, it won't heal, etc. So, oh no, I'll still be able to help you. Well then, why the fuck do I need to get tested for it? What if the same thoughts are the same, even predicted? Who's predicting thoughts? Now, agency is not even exactly a debate term. Warrant is, but I'm just saying there are various ways in which powerful people rob us of our agency. If we're a criminal and we're in jail, then we have very diminished liberty and we have the autonomy to choose our own course of action in very, very constrained ways. If we're being pulled over for suspected drunk driving, even though we're perfectly sober and haven't done anything wrong, we still have to submit to being detained until they agree with that, you know? These are situations where we have to submit to power, you know? But and that those situations obviously are restrictions of our agency, our ability to make our own decisions, do what we think we should do, etc. But the point is, if a doctor is trying to help a patient, they should never try to rob that patient of their agency with duplicitous, deceptive, manipulative bullshit like Dr. Ingram did. What if everything old is new again? It's not. For example, buggy whips, not new again. So it's been interesting to me as I've gone through many imaginary monologues of expressing all this stuff to Dr. Ingram. It's been interesting to me how the topic continues to open up for me and I continue to understand it more deeply and well. So like, if you imagine a society of you know, modern Western standard society, but they've never heard of America and they have a sensible way of life. And they talk to an American and I start asking about medicine and there's a guy and his wife and the wife says, well, you know, I go to the gynecologist every 6 months for a checkup. The people look at each other and say, you have stranger look at vagina every 6 months? And she goes, yeah, well, you know, just to make sure it's okay. It's not sex thing? No, it's a medicine thing. What wrong with your vagina? Oh, nothing. I just go to make sure there's nothing wrong with it. Wouldn't you be able to tell if anything wrong with vagina? I mean, I'm no doctor. How about you? You got a penis doctor? No, I have a proctologist though. I get my butthole checked every year. Something wrong with butthole? No, I just, you know, it's good practice to get your butthole looked at by a stranger once a year. What'd he do with butthole? Oh, he puts his finger up there. You pay stranger to put finger up butthole. You have sex fetish? Oh, no, it's not sexual at all. Actually, I hate it. It's just, you know, what I got to do, doctor's orders. In fact, I'm going to the doctor tomorrow. What for? Oh, a general checkup. What's wrong with you? Nothing. Why you go doctor? He's going to try to find something wrong with me. Wouldn't you be able to tell your body? Oh, I'm no doctor. This is how insane it is, right? There is absolutely zero reason why people should go to the doctor except there's something wrong with them. So it's like Dr. Ingram's trying to play go to a general practitioner. If all of a sudden I get this persistent new pain in the side and I'm worried about it, I'll go to a doctor. I'm obviously not going to call him. I need somebody who can physically examine me. If I start getting blurred vision and headaches a bunch, and I think I might have a brain tumor, obviously I'm going to go to a regular doctor. I'm not going to call him. That's how sane things work. So, for example, in a sane world, the cops are at the cop station. When somebody commits the crime, a victim calls the cop station and says, I've just been victimized by a criminal. Then the cops show up. Similarly, if you need to attain a remedy in the courts, well, first what happens is someone incurs liability by violating your rights. Then you ask them to provide recompense to you, and they refuse. And then, because you have no other choice, you employ the courts to try to get a fair outcome for yourself. You don't go to court and say, I'd like to file a lawsuit against him. Well, you tell me, you're the court, who can I file it against? I mean, run some tests, find out who I might be able to file a lawsuit against. In a sane world, medicine works the same way. You seek out medical treatment when you have something specific wrong with you. Now, sure, I'm all in favor of vaccinating children and stuff like that. That's preparing a kid to be healthy into adulthood so they don't have to go to the doctor, so they don't get measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox, whatever, you know? So, you know, instead we have this paradigm that says you should go to the doctor even though there's nothing wrong with you so that you can let them try to find something wrong with you. We still don't understand. In Octoea, we have medical science, but we only use medicine when sick. Oh, that's not how it works here. See, basically, we're all terribly sick. We just haven't gone to enough doctors yet to find out all the ways that we're sick and all the many things that are wrong with us. And if we can't find anything yet, they just need to keep testing until they find something wrong with you, because that's good health. Of course, it's not good health. It's a terrible idea. It's fucking stupid. Well, sure. So it is the case that there are problems that arise in a person where if you don't get it treated early enough, it can be fatal or whatever. But it's also true that there are risks in the world that if you don't prevent possible harms, could cause the death of you. So by Kay's logic, we never leave the house, we never drive. We avoid contact with any other human beings because we might get a disease. We, when we must leave the house, we wrap ourselves with bubble wrap. We always make sure to stay inside whenever there's any risk of lightning. You know, there are myriad things in the world that pose some kind of risk to us potentially, and ergo, we must embrace any and all preventative safety measures, no matter how onerous, no matter how impositional, no matter how little we want them. Of course, that's not a good way to live. So even if it's the case that going and getting a bunch of tests done on me might give the doctor early detection of something that would eventually kill me, I don't want to consent to that shit. And they shouldn't hold actual things I need and want hostage predicated on my being subjected to medical procedures I don't want. No, health insurance is a stupid fucking idea. That's why I have a doctor that doesn't accept insurance. I have a cash doctor because I expect him to be substantially better and more responsive to his clients than a normal doctor because he's actually spending money that I give him from my bank account. So his appallingly poor performance and lack of character also constitutes kind of a form of robbery, or at least robbery by ineptitude, you know? So the key thing is to remember what comes first in the order of questions. What comes first in the order of questions ought to be consent. What comes first in the second in the order of questions ought to be the patient's actual interests, which need to be defined by the patient, not by the doctor. So, according to me, it's in my actual interest to get Viagra, regardless if I'm still on Wellbutrin. Yes, I don't need it if I'm not on Wellbutrin, but I still want it, and I know what's in my interest best. I know what's best for my self-concept, for my marriage, for my sex life, etc. The idea that I should have to do anything more than inform him of that is insane. It's representative of a industry-wide assault on consent. Well, sure, KE. So it's like when I go out and walking in and the roads are frozen here, Rachel and I have these ice things that you slip on over your shoes, and they have little spikes so you don't slip on the ice. That's a really good thing for us to do because I've gone out without them before and already slipped and fell on my ass. So, the thing is, the likelihood of slipping and falling on your ass when it is icy out there, if you don't have those shoes on, is very high. It's important we take those kind of precautions. Now, when I was younger, the story that was told to me and all my generation mates by a bunch of cops, doctors, and everybody else was that marijuana makes you stupid. However, a recent long longitudinal study of weed smokers, including heavy smokers, shows the opposite, that in fact, cognitive decline is reduced in chronic weed smokers, and it doesn't really matter how much weed you smoke. In fact, weed smokers who smoke a lot of weed are better by 1.9 IQ points than their non-weed smoking compatriots. So, of course, you'll excuse me if I don't think it's worthwhile running around like an idiot, making sure I get tested for every conceivable thing that might be wrong with me, especially if I could be treated better by early detection. I mean, that's no way to live, right? That's not a way to make decisions. It's just packed full of risk fallacies. I mean, here's the thing, Fly Guy. Unfortunately, in America, we have ACA, Affordable Care Act, which means I can just wait till I get sick, and insurance companies have to accept me regardless of pre-existing conditions. So there's no reason anybody should ever have health insurance until they have a significant problem. It will always be cheaper to pay out of pocket for a reasonable amount of medical considerations, like me and Rachel's, than it would be for us to get insurance. No, I'm not being black and white here, Katie. You're asking questions that are moot after the first question's asked. I don't want to consent to meow 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 medical procedures. I don't consent to them. Okay, well then we'll hold hostage what you do want until you agree to purchase all these products you don't want. And the thing is, I'm not frustrated here, okay? I mean, I am, but that's not what's behind this articulation. The more I think about it, the more clarity I have of what's wrong with the medical profession in the status quo and how to fix that. The point is, it may be correct that I'd benefit from a variety of tests, things that could be early detected, but that's an irrelevant question. Why? Because it comes after the first question, which invalidates those questions by my answer, which is, I don't want to consent to those. I don't consent to those tests. And if a medical professional is going to force me at gunpoint to consent to those tests, then they'd be guilty, obviously, of gross medical malpractice and malfeasance. However, somehow it's fine if they do it with with kidnapping something that's precious to you and holding it for ransom. Which not only doesn't make you stupid, apparently, it prevents cognitive decline. So, what we do is recognize that we have a choice. We can live our lives consumed with preventing possible eventualities as though we had no intuition that allowed us to distinguish between what really mattered and what didn't, Different risks are more or less likely. And most importantly, if a potential bad outcome doesn't occur, then all of the preventative efforts you put into it, all the resources you put into it, are complete waste. They go straight down the drain. Whose head am I smoking weed from? My own. But the point is, we all need to return to a model, and everybody should agree with this, that begins with the idea of patient consent. So it shouldn't be okay for a doctor to hold hostage a prescription that would be prescribed purely on the basis of self-reporting until after the patient agrees to a bunch of procedures and tests that they don't want. That's not acceptable. There are medical ethics that are universal, that apply to everybody. All doctors agree that they can't force medical treatment on someone who refuses it. They all learn about and understand the importance of consent. And yet, in practice, they show their absolute contempt for the spirit of consent. Well, my point is, KE, it's critically important that we understand that we live in a world that's not guaranteed anything, right? So there are risks out there. There are possible bad things that can happen to us, ranging from extremely rare, almost extinct viruses like smallpox to you skin your knee and get some weird flesh-eating bacteria infection, or that kid in Australia who swallowed a slug and it killed him. There's all sorts of things that might harm us. By and large, we try to be safe, obviously. I drive as safely as I can, etc. But we're making a mistake if we think that life is best lived through a frame of preventing anything bad that might happen at all times. It's ridiculous. As of now, I've been fairly healthy. I recently lost my job on good terms and lost my health insurance. I don't feel compelled to get a new one, but my wife seems to think it's important. Well, she wants to go have her vagina looked at by a stranger every 6 months. I think the thing that's most surprising is that there's no such thing as a penis doctor. I'm kind of shocked that we haven't all been indoctrinated that it's important as males to go have our penis examined by a stranger every 6 months. Because, after all, he's an expert on penises, and he'll notice if something's wrong with it. Like, Rachel doesn't go to the doctor. She doesn't go to the gynecologist or anything. And she did get a UTI, I don't know, like 3 or 4 days ago. But we just looked up how to treat it. I went into the pharmacy and got an over-the-counter medication that treated some of the symptoms of it. She had a bunch of cranberry juice, etc., and it's gone away. If it hadn't gone away, we would have booked an appointment with an actual doctor. But Rachel has a much more sort of gut level concern about doctors because she just doesn't trust them. She doesn't want to deal with one of these professionals because these professionals are lost in a fog of autocratic, you know, blackmail. And obviously, Rachel's experience with medical professionals over the last, until Dr. Ingram, previous 10 years, has made her correctly conclude that in life, one important thing is to avoid dealing with cops as much as possible. Don't have yourself getting handcuffed, right? Number two, avoid getting in court as much as possible. These are places where other individuals have all the power and you have none. And number three, and perhaps most important, see as few doctors as possible, as infrequently as possible. Because in a lot of ways, they're the worst. They're robbing you of your agency, turning you into merely a revenue stream or a difficulty, forgetting their mandate to try to help you, unconcerned about what you want or what you think, and unconcerned also about what other doctors think. If you go to a doctor and tell them, oh, I've gotten these x-rays here already, here are the x-rays. Say, well, I can't use their x-rays. I have to x-ray you myself. Well, here are my blood test results. I need to do my own blood test. Why? Because I didn't do these, so I need my blood test. I have to do it. But why? It's the same blood test. I didn't order that blood test. Well, you're going to order it now. Right, and then I'll get to see what the results are. You can see them on this paper. Again, that's not my blood test. I didn't order that blood test. But it's the same as the blood test you're going to order. Doesn't matter, right? Because doctors want to execute their habit of procedures. They're typically, very TE. Most of all, what a doctor doesn't want is for the patient to have any knowledge or information about what they should do, what the doctor should do. It's like you could go in there with a specific problem and the doctor will probably practically say, wait, don't tell me. I like to figure this out myself. I'm going to run this huge battery of tests. That's essentially what they do, because you say, okay, well, here's the problem. Like when we went to see the German practitioner for treatment for Rachel's serotonin syndrome, I think it was, or maybe neuropathy, we went to that nurse practitioner in hand with a diagnosis and explanation from a clinical psychiatrist about the patient he had and her serotonin syndrome. The nurse practitioner said, well, we're going to need to run our own test. You can't even test for serotonin syndrome. Well, I know. That's why we're going to test for a bunch of other stuff so we can eliminate it. So I see your approach to determining if Rachel has the serotonin syndrome, which we've already told you she does have, is to run a bunch of tests to determine if she has something else. Well, yeah, because if she doesn't have anything else, then maybe we can consider the possibility that she's got serotonin syndrome. Okay, that's not saying you don't test for things you think they don't have so you can eliminate it. If we did things like that, if I went to the store to buy a jacket, the attendant in the store would first need to confirm that I don't want every other article of clothing in the store. And then and only then will the clerk agree, all right, I guess you do want this jacket. if clothing stores worked like doctors. Hey, look, Focus Film W. My point is, shit on insurance, shit on doctors, shit on nurses, all you want, stuff like that. Don't shit on Big Farm. Big Farm is the only entity doing meaningful work. Big Farm is the reason I'm complaining about not getting Mia drug and not getting Mia drug more easily, because without them, those drugs wouldn't exist. I have no problem with big pharmaceutical companies making big profits for coming up with extremely useful and great drugs like, say, albuterol for people who have asthma, or Viagra for people who have been prescribed an antidepressant with sexual side effects, you know? Yeah. Ooh-wee, because with all the new subs, we'll think TWP, like, there are no new subs. I mean, we're still at 1,850. I mean, 18,500. I know, and that's one of those things, like, if the doctor actually needed to, establish boundaries with me, it would be because, for example, I was asking for ketamine because I want it because it's fun. In my opinion, he should be perfectly fine prescribing me that for that reason. But in that instance, that's what was happening with us. I would understand his, effort to establish boundaries and stuff. He doesn't want to get, uh, you know, pushed into prescribing things that are just, for me to party with or whatever. I get that he wouldn't want to prescribe something like some sort of remedy for COVID because they need to test to see if I have it, right? He wouldn't be okay with me saying, and I wouldn't ever expect him to be okay with me saying, can you prescribe me Vicodin for this toothache? Understandable. He'd expect the dentist to do that, right? But what his job is to prescribe things based on self-reporting, those kind of drugs. Like the two that I asked for, albuterol, a completely non-abusable, harmless, but useful inhaler that lots of people need and benefit from. Something that there's no test for. You can't do a blood test to say, oh yeah, you have asthma. But the doctor has to take your word for it that you sometimes get wheezy and need an inhaler. And then they prescribe it based on your testimony. So, of course, that's what his specialty is drugs that you prescribe based on self-reporting. So, anyway, at the end of that conversation, when I do have it, the point should be clear. I've been trying to be a trouble-free patient because I understand that I need to stay on your good side to avoid massive life-disrupting problems. If you were to fire me as a client, I then have to find another doctor to prescribe me 60 milligrams a day of Adderall. That's not easy. And of course, before he did that, I'd have to go through his whole assessment process because he wouldn't think whatever your assessments were relevant to anything, because all doctors think only they in their assessment can be trusted. Hi, Big Smoke. I will smoke. So, at the end of it, I'll be able to say to him, look, because you kind of stubbornly didn't do your job, looking for any excuse to pass me off to another person, I ended up having to do your job. And it turns out I'm a better psychiatrist than you. I have a better understanding of the linkage between Wellbutrin and sexual dysfunction. I know what the recommended course of action for it is. I understand now that 72% of men who are prescribed an antidepressant report sexual side effects. And that, of course, since you're a psychiatrist, you probably have plenty of men who are on antidepressants. And of course, that because this is standard protocol, you're the one prescribing them Viagra. So what is it about me? Why are you picking on me? Is it because I'm a better psychiatrist than you? At least I cared enough to do the research. I didn't actually. The D2 did, but I'm going to position it as though I don't want to lie though. So I'm just going to say, I found those things because I found them when the person from the chat showed them to me. I don't want to go into all the detail, my teeth aren't crooked; they're missing. So what crooked refers to is when things are like janky like this. Whereas missing means you're lacking teeth. So it's a new vocabulary word for you. Wow, you guys hammered him. You guys are much more stern than me. That's fine. I'm sure we would have just continued to prove himself a worthless sack of shit. Doctors have licenses they don't want to risk. Okay, well, that's the point. I've gone through this doctor's assessment. He knows me well. His intuition should tell him, and he's confirmed that he agreed with me about this, that I am nothing but relentlessly honest with him about everything. The question is, can I... Big Pharma is not engaged in any genocide, neither is Big Insurance. Big Insurance is engaged in a legislative cash grab called ordering people to buy their product. In other words, codifying a middleman that necessarily only increases health costs forevermore. And that's fine. That's fine, Kay. I understand that doctors need to do these things. The problem I'm having is that I paid out of pocket for this private psychiatrist. I jumped through all his hoops. I did his initial assessment. I did everything I'm supposed to do. And I didn't push to see where the boundaries are at all. I only asked for things that weren't asking him to do anything iffy at all. Just prescribe me a totally unabusable, harmless inhaler that's always and only prescribed based on the testimony of the patient and not on any kind of test. There's no test for asthma that they give, You're either, if you're not having an asthma attack, you can go to the doctor. They just have to trust that you're telling the truth. And they always do because there's no reason for you to lie. There's nothing fun about albuterol. Regarding Viagra, it's necessarily the case that the doctors always and only prescribe it based on the testimony of the patient, because to do otherwise would be to demand to see a video of you and your wife successfully having sex without Wellbutrin and then failing to successfully have sex while on Wellbutrin. And even then, you might want to see multiple instances because you want to make sure it's not a fluke in the data or something like this. Oh, they will. He will prescribe it. I mean, he did prescribe it once, and he said, I'm not going to prescribe it again because that's the sort of thing you need to get from a general practitioner, which was a lie. Because, in fact, when you go to a psychiatrist and get an antidepressant, if you're a man, there's 7 out of 10 men end up saying to their psychiatrist, hey, this has some sexual side effects. And according to Clinical Psychiatry magazine or journal or whatever it is, there's a clear recommended path for the clinical psychiatrist who has a patient reporting sexual side effects, and that is to prescribe them Viagra. It doesn't say refer them to a general practitioner who will prescribe them Viagra. Why did you? Wait, let me see. Show media, I tend to not think much of. That's fine. Why would you? Don't hide that, okay? He says, I'm detecting unease. Could Eric be, he asks, in fear of being discovered as Nazi scum? Okay, so I like to respond to things like that. So in response to your first sentence, you have a poorly operating unease detection system going on. And number two, I have no fear of being discovered as such because I absolutely am not such. I don't want those. This is all beyond the point. I could get Viagra easily enough, I have no doubt, on some sensible online doctor who just is like, I'm just gonna be a cash cow. You meet me with me 5 minutes. I say, would you be happier with a more vigorous boner? You say yes. He says, here's the Viagra. I'm sure I could do that. I don't doubt that. That's not the fucking point, right? Well, I mean, then he needs to tell me that, right? He needs to explain himself and say, the reason I can't do I agree, I lied about the Viagra, but I wasn't lying about the albuterol, and here are the possible consequences, and this is why I don't want to prescribe it. He needs to actually tell me his explanation, not act as though I'm some child who doesn't need to be informed about all this shit. Like I learned in that one article about the guy who who had problems from Wellbutrin, got prescribed Viagra, and it worked for him, and that's the recommended course of action and such. It was some hypothesizing in that article that the Wellbutrin permanently changed his brain in ways that may make him always require Viagra, even if he is off the Wellbutrin. So if that's a legitimate risk from this drug, that's something the doctor needed to inform me of, right? That's hugely significant. How the mighty have fallen? Who's the mighty? There's a risk prescribing you any drug that could possibly have adverse side effects. It's just bullshit. I agree, it's bullshit. Mister, I will test the body language at you. Okay. So, I don't know if you guys have been watching the news, but according to Coin Operated, the mighty have fallen. I don't know which mighty, but sounds pretty exciting stuff. I appreciate the proactive defense and everything, but I guess the best outcome is for Coin Operated to feel what he inevitably will as he continues to deal with me, which is utterly defeated and out of his league. I don't know if my doctor has a God complex or not. What I do know is that he fucked up and he's going to have big problems. Well, right, because I'm going to determine in this next appointment whether he suffers from accountability avoidance syndrome or not. I got him dead to rights. There's no possible legitimate excuse he can come up with or anything he can say. There's no possible justification for ignoring my first message reporting the side effect. And there's no possible justification for referring me to a general practitioner when I proposed a solution after he had ignored me, when in both circumstances, in both situations, he could have said, make an appointment, let's talk about it. He could have said, let's try a different antidepressant then and see if it's actually the problem. He could have said, well, let's take you off the Wellbutrin. Again, in both instances, he could have just said, let's make an appointment and talk to me about it. Instead, he chose not to do his job at all and to tell me a lie in order to justify him not having to do his job. It's so crazy that it's been occupying my thoughts ever since it happened, and I keep trying to come up with all the possible explanations for this. One of them being, as I said, he doesn't like me and he's just trying to make it difficult for me to be his patient, so I'll go to some other doctor. It's possible. Number two, he really thinks I should go to a general practitioner and it would be good for me, so he makes my life, he makes it difficult for me to get the drugs I need without going to a general practitioner. Number three, he's married to the idea that Wellbutrin is effective in combination with Viagra as an ED treatment, and my experience and the data I'm providing falsifies, or at least calls into serious question, some of the assumptions upon which he's been prescribing drugs. Number four, he was lazy. He wants to do as little work as possible for the money he gets paid. I don't know. Any of those is conceivably possible. Sure. Of course, he knows that it's a synergetic plenty of men have come to him about. That's a synergetic. I don't know what a synergetic is, but I'm sure plenty of his patients who are males are currently being prescribed Viagra by him. It's got to be the case based on everything I've read, given how common sexual side effects are for antidepressants, given that he's a psychiatrist who probably most of his patients he prescribes either, amphetamines or antidepressants or, like antipsychotics, stuff like that. A lot of those kind of drugs cause sexual side effects, and he's prescribing some of them in combination with one another. So why in the world is he picking on me? If you guys are into LGBTQ, BBQ, we should grow some meats. That's how they do it. Tell you a lot. So, folks, Film W, if they do it that way, then they're being bad doctors stupidly. You can be bad doctor intelligently, like so with the albuterol. Even though Dr. Ingram knows that my life is easier, I have a thing I sometimes need when I have albuterol. I still have some, but even though he knows that, he can claim, look, what Kay's saying, hey, I'm strict about my jurisdictional limits here. So if I just can't prescribe albuterol, right? In that case, harms to the patient are foreseeable, but not intentional. He's doing what he should do as a doctor by the book, and he can't be swayed by utilitarian arguments that he should violate procedural norms because I'm saying that I refuse to get it in the normal way, and therefore the harms are on me, not on him. Well, that's all correct, provided That's his actual reason. Given that he used that same reason for something where it's abjectly not true, then we can right then say, oh, this is something that's demonstrably a lie in this instance. So in this instance too, we cannot trust it. It may be a plausible reason in this instance, but just as it wasn't his real reason in this instance, we should assume it's not his real reason in this instance either. Oh, yes, you are, K.E. You know you're Christian. K.E. likes to lie about it, but she's super Christian. Like, she keeps a manger scene up in her house all year round. It gets more and more elaborate as the years pass. You'd be surprised that wasn't his reason? Well, it clearly wasn't the second time he said it was. There's no disputing that. It's impossible for him to say that a strict application of his jurisdictional limits justifies him referring to me to a general practitioner for the Viagra. So we know in that instance, the reason was other than what he stated. So even if you believe that that's the reason for the albuterol, we still need an actual reason for the other one. We need to ask him, why should I take you seriously that you're telling the truth about what your actual reason is regarding the albuterol when you use the same reason as a lie for the Viagra? Hey, Eric, how do you explain a person liking puzzles, riddles, algorithmic problems, etc., but only given they are self-contained? What's a not self-contained example of this thing? It's like you're saying, like, say, World of Warcraft is not self-contained, whereas, like, chess is, or what? She identifies as a Muslim for Christ. She's Muslim, but she rejects Muhammad and the Quran in favor of Jesus. She also rejects the Bible in favor of my new updated Bible. Because she's smart like that. Tactically, this makes host Eric feel better. Well, yeah, I appreciate you guys making the arguments on his behalf as well. It helps me to prep against possible things. Kay, what you said about the licensing stuff and such, it's good to know that might be an argument he makes. And that would be my response. I'd say, okay, well, certainly it might be factually true that what you're saying about the albuterol, that it's not considered your jurisdiction, and that in theory, if you were to have a shit ton of such prescriptions, the authorities that be might look askance at that. However, I remind you of a couple of things. Number one, I was prescribed Adderall for years, and who prescribed it to me? A general practitioner. So if he can prescribe Adderall to me for years and not get into any trouble, and it's a scheduled drug and something much more likely to attract the scrutiny of some kind of regulator than albuterol, then why can't he prescribe albuterol? I think the doctor's an INTP. And number two, even if it is factually the case that you could get in trouble for doing that in theory, we already know that that justification is something you used in this other instance, but you were lying, both about it factually, but more importantly, you were presenting a false justification. Since this exact justification was presented as a false justification here, even though it's factually true here, in its capacity as a justification, we should assume you're lying again. Well, it might be true that's not the real reason you're doing it. Because after all, you lost all credibility with that reason when I demonstrated that you lied with that reason here, that it's factually false and therefore not actually your reason. In this other instance, just because it's factually true doesn't mean you're telling me the actual reason. And we should assume you're not. So don't try to tell me now that you still don't want to prescribe me the albuterol because it's not within your jurisdictional purview, because you've lost the capacity to make that argument for anything and have anyone believe you, because you've lost all your credibility, especially in that specific area, right? I can no longer trust that the jurisdictional purview is your actual reason for anything. I have to assume always that when you say that, you're lying. It might be true factually that it's not your jurisdictional purview, but you're keeping secret the real reason why you won't exceed that purview. That's how shit works, you know? It's like, I can't go to the store with you today because I got to go to my grandma's house. And it's plausible in that instance, right? You know, it is Thanksgiving. He usually goes to grandma's house on Thanksgiving. It all makes sense. You don't question it. Then the next week, you're like, hey, you want to go to the movies? He's like, I got to go to my grandma's house. And you find out as you drive later, as you're driving down the street, you realize that he's at this other friend's house. He's not at his grandma's house. And you drive by grandma's house and you see grandma just sitting in the living room watching TV through the window. And you realize, oh shit, he was just lying to me. Do you still believe him the first time he was going to his grandma's house? It might be true. It's more likely to be true because it was Thanksgiving. But he hasn't earned any faith or trust, right? We should assume every time he gives an excuse, he's lying, because he's demonstrated that if he doesn't think the answer is convenient enough for him, the truth, then he'll simply come up with a lie that makes this whole thing easier for him. Oh no. I mean, we're not both too fired up to have a combo where you're not trying to get the other divinities wrong. That is exactly what this conversation is. It's testing to see if my doctor has accountability avoidance syndrome or if he's a person of character. If he's a person of character, when caught and found guilty and what's indisputably a lie, if he's the doctor and I have factual evidence that shows how I messaged him about a side effect of the drug he had just prescribed me and he ignored my message, compelling me to do his job, he could have said, make an appointment then, etc., right? Because all the facts are on my side, this isn't going to be a debate or an argument. First of all, he's intimidated by me to begin with. He's scared of me. So I'm not worried about him. I don't care if it's destructive or not. When you dig a hole and put a bomb in it and sit in a chair on top of that bomb and tell me to go trigger it, you incur the consequences. What's going to happen to him is simply he will incur the natural consequences of his own bad behavior. And we will find out if he's a complete fucking coward and a shitbag, then he won't be able to acknowledge what's happened here. The only way this ends is with him saying, you were right, Eric. I was wrong. I did lie to you. Here's why. I've learned that that's unacceptable and I won't do it again. No, I mean, he can't possibly believe that it's normal for a psychiatric patient who has sexual side effects, reports sexual side effects, to be referred to a general practitioner because it's not appropriate for the psychiatrist to prescribe Viagra. That's a bald-faced lie. He could not possibly believe it, right? It is, in fact, extremely common. In fact, it is the prescribed course of action to psychiatrists who have patients, male patients particularly, who report such side effects as a result of their antidepressants. It is the default status quo. This is what you should do thing that happens in psychiatry. It's all over the scholarly journals. And all the citations and all the articles linking antidepressants to sexual dysfunction, and additionally linking Viagra to the correct prescription for that. All of these articles are in like literally things called clinical psychiatry, like the title of the journal, and other journals that are clearly psychiatric journals. They're not general practitioner journals. Presumably, if you were to encounter somebody getting Viagra in the world randomly, it might be the case that they're more likely to have gotten it from a general practitioner, but that's only because most people don't have psychiatrists. And it's also the case that any psychiatrist has a vastly higher percentage of their patients being prescribed Viagra by them than a general practitioner has a percentage of his patients being prescribed Viagra by them. Because, after all, psychiatry is a thing that prescribes a variety of drugs, such as benzos, which kill sex drive, such as Prozac, which apparently most people find causes sexual dysfunction. That doesn't do it with me. It makes me horny. They prescribe Remeron and a bunch of other antidepressants, all of which have sexual side effects. And as psychiatrists, they understand that the protocol here, the standard operating procedure here, is that they should prescribe a solution to those sexual side effects. Normally, Viagra is number one on the list. Cialis, other things like that, are also indicated as having varying degrees of effectiveness for varying demographics. Anyway, the scholarly literature for psychiatrists is rife with information about how psychiatrists should respond to patients reporting sexual side effects. And the answer is Viagra. So in other words, not only did I do his job when I suggested he give me Viagra, I did it right. No, not both of us are wrong. No K. Not both of us are wrong. You see, because I don't necessarily have to have him prescribe me the albuterol if he wants to be stubborn about it. Because in that instance, it is the case that he has an argument, right? But he needs to make the argument that you made. He's never made that argument to me. He's never said, here's why. He just said, this is something you normally get from a general practitioner. So go get it there. Okay, well, that's not actually a reason why. If you want to say, well, normally on Thursdays at 2 p.m., I just kind of ignore the patient. That's not a justification for it. Right? This is not about whether I need Viagra or not. You're correct. Because I had a medical professional, and this is a man I respected and trusted. He genuinely helped Rachel. When I hired him as an expensive, cash-only, no insurance, private psychiatrist who specializes in medication management, what I thought I was purchasing was a streamlined set of hoops, right? That's what I should have been purchasing. So if he wants to stick to his guns on the albuterol, that's fine, but he needs to give me a justification other than this isn't exactly how it's normally done. That's not a reason not to do it. That's the only justification he gave me. Well, normally you get that from a general practitioner. That's not saying I'm not supposed to do this, so I'm not going to. It's not saying they need to run this kind of test before they're willing to prescribe it, and I can't run that test. He's not doing any of those things. It implies, though, in a statement because I think he assumes you know but don't care, thus why you asked. No, but he, remember, we were going fine. I was on Adderall, and gabapentin, that was it, I had a necessary meeting with him, just supposed to meet with me every once in a while. I mentioned to him that, things weren't great. I was engaging in a lot of negative self-talk, and as a consequence, I started occasionally taking Rachel's Prozac and it seemed to make me feel better. Things hurt a little less, etc. Then he prescribed Wellbutrin. Okay? Immediately upon taking it in the live stream, and remember, there's no conflict between us yet, right? No, there's no conflict at all. I respect the guy. I'm not thinking I need to protect myself against his bad behavior or anything like that. We're on perfectly good terms. There are no problems whatsoever. I'm not mad about the albuterol. I totally accepted it. I just figured, well, I guess that's fair. Nothing I can do about it. I wasn't complaining about it at all. It wasn't on my mind that it was bad for him to have refused to do it. None of that was the case. So you sure do believe you know things here that you do not actually know, right? Then when I sent him a message reporting the side effect, I got no response from him. That's atypical. He's normally a good doctor who's responsive. After quite a long time getting no response, I said in kind of a vulnerable message, I said, look, this is really messing with my self-concept and my understanding of myself as a man and my et cetera. Can you please prescribe me Viagra? And then he said, Viagra is something you normally get from a general practitioner. I'll prescribe it once, but you have to get it from them up thereafter. All through that, there's no conflict or tension. I don't think he expected me to be mad when he said that. I don't think he expected any pushback at all. Because after all, I gave him no pushback at all on the albuterol. I said, okay, I understand, thanks. That's it. So he just expected the same reply from me this time. So indeed, it is not the case that we're mad at each other. Or there's going to be. I expect when I do meet with him on January 16th, he'll be just back from vacation, by the way. He's like out of the office until then. That he'll be expecting. Because the last message I sent to him, after I said, what the hell about this Viagra thing, sent him a message saying, but this, he sent me a message back saying that he thought it was disrespectful for me to dictate things to him. I know what he was talking about. I said, you are my primary care physician. You are my primary care physician. Don't tell me to go get a different primary care physician. He said, I'm not a primary care physician. I'm a psychiatrist. And he thought it was disrespectful for me to tell him to dictate that to him. But of course, what was really disrespectful was him not bothering to reply to my reported side effects or give me any indication that he knew what was going on. That he read the message and had any thoughts about it at all, one way or the other. I just figured, oh hell, it slipped through the cracks. I have people email slip through the cracks all the time. It's fine. But when I eventually started to get more and more troubling to me because it was on the Wellbutrin, I started to get afraid, like, oh, what if this is just the new norm or something? And it really started to mess with my head. So that's when I asked him for it. And, all through this, as far as I could tell, and I think anybody would agree based on the exchanges, there was no conflict. And I'm quite convinced that he didn't expect any pushback on the Viagra thing at all. Since the last message I sent to him was basically like, look, I'm sorry I was disrespectful. You're the only doctor I trust. I don't want you to fire me as a patient. he's going to expect me to be vulnerable and appeasing probably in this upcoming conversation, given everything. He's gonna be operating on the assumption that I have succumbed to practical things. I don't want to piss off my doctor or whatever. I don't think he's going to be mad at me at all. If he's thought about it at all, I think he's going to be nervous. Keep in mind, he is not an angry guy at all. I don't know if he's a 9 or whatever, but he's already intimidated by me. It was weird. I noticed it when we went to his actual office. It's a Rachel in there and stuff. And he told me something he thought I didn't want to hear. And I actually did want to hear it. But it was then I realized, oh shit, this guy's super intimidated by me. Because it's not like I'm trying to intimidate people. I'm not looking for signs of people being intimidated. But you know, I am capable of picking up on some obvious tells, and that was the instance in which I recognized that he's fighting his own battle. He was fighting his own battle at that point, right? Because things were more intense then, of course. It was not that long after my dad. And he basically wanted to be like, this binging going on here isn't that great. And I was fine hearing it, but he was afraid it was going to make me mad. He doesn't quite have faith that I'm quite as reasonable and correct as I am. In our previous conversations, you know, we've had good conversations. The first conversation I had with him, I gave him, I ran him through the full ringer. You know, in other words, I dealt with him in full force adversarial correctness mode. And he basically passed my test. He enjoyed being grilled. He answered the questions. He agreed when I corrected him on some shit, like, or pointed out a mitigating factor. Like you say, well, this study went around. I say, that study didn't even have the baseline. And he'd be like, okay, well. So he is a reasonable guy. He has been in the past. I don't think he's going to be able to defend his behavior here because he just, even from a simplest perspective, ignoring my message, then trying to shuttle me off to another doctor, and then saying in the email, the last message, that he was skeptical of the link. Well, if he's genuinely skeptical of the link, then he either thinks I'm lying or deluded. So, I mean, I don't know what to tell him, but I should be his primary source of information that's relevant to his treatment of me. I'm not a dog. I can actually talk to him. He's not a veterinarian. So he's going to obviously need to provide some kind of answer to what I can articulate as a series of clear failures, at least on a professional ground. Like his website thing or whatever says right at the top, he specializes in medication management. That's one of the things that we say, okay, this is a possible candidate for Rachel. And then say, well, yeah, well, I mean, I specialize in medication management when I feel like it. He certainly can't justify not at least making an appointment with me to talk about it, telling me to make an appointment to talk about it. He can't justify not at least saying something like, well, maybe we'll try a different antidepressant, or are you sure it's this is linkage? Or he could have said it initially, well, I'm skeptical of this linkage. At which point, what's the next step? Obviously, make an appointment to talk to me. Instead of informing me about anything, right? He just said that to go to a general practitioner because that's normal, even though it's totally not. Just as a patient, I would say, shouldn't I expect you to be responsive when I report a side effect that I don't like from a drug you just prescribed me? So I'm experiencing the drug for the first time, getting used to it, and I'm telling you how it's affecting me. Shouldn't I expect you to at least say, no, you're wrong, or something? It'll be hard for him to justify just ignoring me. It'll be hard for him to justify instructing me to go to another doctor when he had not one but two opportunities to tell me to make an appointment with him to at least discuss it. He could say he was trying to save me the money of the appointment because he wasn't going to prescribe it, but then he has to explain why he wasn't going to prescribe it, and there's no good explanation for that. And if you try to say he's trying to save me the money, I say, well, look, I'm spending money right now to help you. You have fucked up. You need to be held accountable. I'm the person who does that in the world because I'm not intimidated by authority figures. I mean, everyone's intimidated by cops in the moment, but I understand that they aren't intimidating at all, really, if you comply completely, because you'll have your chance to deal with the thing in an accountability forum like court. Not like court, in an accountability forum, court. Well, it's as simple as saying this, what would he, I'm sure, took medical ethics in psychiatry school. What would a medical ethics professor say about this whole mess? Would he say that the psychiatrist has any responsibility at all to follow up with his patient on problems that the patient reports with the medication? Even if there's no such responsibility, does the doctor have any responsibility to tell the truth to the patient regarding matters significant to his health? Or is it fine for the doctor to lie to the patient just so he can avoid giving him Viagra for reasons yet to be determined? I'm not sure what the answer is, I'm not a medical professor. I'm not a medical ethics professor. But I suspect if you were to look into the matter, that there are some serious ethical concerns with how he's dealt with this. On one hand, there may be sort of professional competency issues. If in fact he wasn't aware of that article with the case study, the person who didn't have any sexual dysfunction until being prescribed Wellbutrin, etc., then maybe he's not doing enough to keep up with developments in psychiatry. If, for example, he's predicated on this idea on the fact that sometimes Wellbutrin is prescribed alongside Viagra as a supplemental ED treatment, Well, he's not caught up with the newest literature that says those linkages are specious and coming to a lot of doubt, and it's highly likely that we should toss that notion out. He might not be aware of the new literature that casts a lot of doubt on those old findings, but I am because of D2. And, what's he going to say about that? It's like he says, well, that's not true what you're saying. That's not how it works. I just reference the scholarly article and say, well, here's the case study of this guy. I'll read the relevant parts and say, so obviously it does happen. Happened to this guy. This doctor, you'll note, didn't refer him to a general practitioner. No, KE. This is about me helping this man to have a very much needed come to Jesus moment. He needs to be responsible. So he's treating me like I'm a dog and he's a veterinarian, even though he should, by this point, know that I'm not your average patient. I've been super nice and everything for a long time. Maybe you forgot about it. Too many angles? Yeah, well, it's true that you can't structure a case with endless possible arguments. But as I continue going over the various arguments, the case refines. So, Lily Lolly, I get it. You're whatever. Have fun with that. Have fun sucking ass. I'm just glad it's done. I gotta take this Eric guy down a notch. He seems like he's confident or something. Fucking asshole. Thinks he's so smart. Well, y'all, just go spend time with your fellow morons someplace. I'm not in the mood for your shenanigans. Obviously. I don't think anybody really is in the mood for your shenanigans ever, but in this particular instance, just, be a sensible fool and go elsewhere. I'm from Canada and I gave up on doctors long ago. He's treating you like a certain type of patient, not necessarily the one you think, and it's unfair. My point is the turning point won't happen by sending articles. I'm not sending anything. I have an appointment. He has to talk to me face to face. He needs to answer the question, why did you tell me that it's normal for a psychiatrist to send their patient who's been prescribed antidepressants out to a general practitioner to get the Viagra? Why did you tell me that when it's not true? He needs to answer that question. I mean, it's factually false, right? I will point to many articles in Clinical Psychiatry, the medical journal, that prove, in no uncertain terms, that psychiatrists who prescribe antidepressants not only receive high volume of reports of sexual side effects, but that the standard operating procedure for psychiatrists is to prescribe either Viagra, Cialis, or one of those other kind of drugs to their patients who report those side effects. It is certain that he currently is prescribing Viagra to multiple patients. Oh, it's okay. You know what? I'll do that for you, Lily Lolly. We'll just go ahead and end the stream for you. Oh, it's fine. I ended the stream for Lily Ollie. That way they don't have to. They don't have to deal with it anymore. Oh, sure. No, I did it for her or him or whatever. They wanted to end the stream, so voila. Ask and you shall receive. Hi, Carlos Paiva. Nice to see you. Long time to see you. So just want to say, Eric, as a textbook male ETP myself, I really appreciate you. You've really helped me since I first discovered MBTI, etc. in 2017. I do appreciate you, bro. Well, thanks, Focused Film W asterisk 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 asterisk. He's not going to answer anything that will trap him. I mean, the thing is, you guys are all imagining me talking to some, composite doctor, a composite of the doctors you've had, etc. What's kind of a critical factor here in this instance is I handpicked Dr. Ingram, and I made a great decision. As I said in my last message to him, I don't trust any other doctor. Now I don't trust him, but I expect him to restore my trust. And I expect him to blanch and realize he's got no choice but to acknowledge it when I point out his lies. When I point out the fact that how can a psychiatrist justify ignoring a message from a patient who's just been prescribed a drug, complaining about a side effect of that drug? To provide no response at all, like, we'll talk about it next appointment, would have been a response. You can't justify simply ignoring that. And he did. He can't justify sending me to, referring me to, not even a referral, right? In an HMO, at least you get referred to a specific person. He just said, go to any general practitioner. Which is, of course, ridiculous because, number one, it's completely atypical. In other words, it's the opposite of the book. Whatever his book says, it doesn't say to do that. It says the opposite. It says, prescribe that patient, yeah. So he's not going to be able to defend that. And he is, I think, an INTP. I've already had extensive evidence of me pushing him and him conceding where I'm right. In other words, he doesn't try intellectually to defend things that aren't correct historically. So, while I don't doubt that the conversation I'm going to have with Dr. Ingram, as imagined by you as a conversation against some composite doctor, that in your imagined situation, given the nature of the composite doctor you put together, perhaps all I would be doing was blowing up the relationship. I actually still believe, and I could be proved wrong, that he's going to display character and decency and acknowledge shit and make it right. At least with the Viagra, hopefully with the albuterol as well. So that's what I think. In other words, I haven't lost all trust in him. I haven't lost all faith in him. I believe he's a good man. I've not found good reason to condemn him heretofore. I'm hoping this is the exception, the deviation from the good doctor that he is and good person that he is, rather than the actual underlying truth of him. So if it turns out that I've had too much faith in humanity and the worst aspect, the worst interpretation is the one that's correct, then I will find that out. But I'm operating under the assumption that he is a person who can be accountable, who can acknowledge when he's wrong, and who can, evolve his paradigm. I think it'll be a wake up call in general that he's gotten complacent at best, right? A doctor that doesn't respond to a message, like I said, for a long time, and then, when you suggest a solution, tries to pawn you off on some inferior doctor. Well, you know, obviously, in order to not acknowledge that there was a problem there, he'd have to like do something like refuse to discuss it, or say it never happened, or but there's a paper trail. He'd have to shift into overtly toxic person. Basically, he'd have to display a complete subjectivity, and willingness to sacrifice my interest completely in order to avoid being wrong. In which case, there's something really wrong with him. But I don't think it's gonna happen. I think he's a regular good guy. He just fucked up. I'd like to know why. I want to know what the actual answer is, right? Because there's more than one possible answer. No money, of course not. Here's the thing: there aren't many people I invest trust in. Rachel, Delilah, people who are privy to my intimate life. They live with me, etc. Occasionally, somebody will get kind of, in proximity to all the most personal stuff in our life, like the psychiatrist. Before this incident, I trusted and respected him. So normally, in almost every instance, when somebody lies to me and pulls some bullshit, and I try to hold them accountable, they run away. They don't listen to me. I don't have an opportunity to say my piece and have them respond to what I say. Normally, I'm always denied that opportunity because people who engage in bad behavior, they are also the most likely to avoid consequences from it. So anyway, obviously, when somebody that you've trusted and come to like, respect, and trust over the course of the time that he's been treating Rachel and then eventually me, who knows all the details, all the significant details of our medical life, instances of Rachel's past that spiraled in this way or that, my drug addict history, all that stuff. I mean, with me, it's no different than anybody else because I don't have any personal secrecy stuff, right? So everything, but all the stuff I told them from a normal person would be confiding probably dark secrets or something. Like, oh, I did these drugs and that drug. Or the patient wouldn't tell the truth because they want to try to manage the doctor, right? But yeah, so I need to find out, like, are you actually one of the bad guys? Or what's going on here, I don't normally more or less impossible to betray my trust because I don't invest any trust in you. I invest trust in few people. Like I would be determined to get some answers if, say, Winston's mom betrayed my trust. I trust Winston's mom. I trust her, a lot. And if I then one day went and somebody sent me a video and I saw in the chat Winston's mom going like, "Oh my God, so much nicer over here." That I ended up just like wasting time at air extreme sometimes, but secretly I really think he's a fucking asshole and I hate him. I'd feel my trust would fail. I'd feel like, I thought I knew you and I don't. What's going on, Winston's mom? Can you please explain this to me? I want to know what's going on. Well, the same thing with the doctor, you know? I trusted him. He did a great job with Rachel. He was cool with me. He doubled my Adderall prescription. I didn't even ask for that, right? And when I floated the idea that I might be going through something or whatever, he said, well, let's prescribe Wellbutrin. Like, well, yeah, this guy is really responsive, you know? So, no, we're not entering into this meeting with a history of a problem. We're entering into this meeting with the reality that this psychiatrist has betrayed my trust. I trusted and respected him, and he tried to pull this bullshit. He tried to slide this bullshit past me like he thought I was an idiot and wasn't going to catch it. Do I trust you yet? I don't distrust you. Winston's mom's been around for a long time. I know I grok her, okay? And I trust her completely. She may be wrong about things, but she's good, you know? She radiates good, virtue, moral, that kind of good, you know? I believe it to the core of my soul that Winston's mom is an ally and that I could talk to her about things if I need to. If I need an ally with, you know, her wide ranging expertise, she's an expert in lots of things, right? But if I were to be president, I'd want her involved. I trust her discretion, judgment, reasonableness, etc. And I also trust that she likes me and is on my side, you know, that she wants to be on my side. If I do something bad, she's not going to be there, oh, you know what, I support her no matter what. But I mean, provided I'm being a good person, she's happy about that because she feels like she's on my side and she's on a good team that that isn't stupid and mean and hateful. If it turned out that was like if she then did something that was that threw all of that into doubt, I would want an explanation. Just as I do from the doctor. I think I understand what happened here. I think in a turn of paternalism, he determined that if he makes it more difficult for me to get things I need, except via a general practitioner, that I'll go to a general practitioner and submit to a bunch of medical things that I don't want to consent to. But I'll point out that that's just holding hostage the actual solution to an actual problem. You know, saying we won't solve your problem unless you give up your right to consent to things. Basically, it's not okay. What if, can you imagine a doctor with a patient who needed insulin telling that patient, look, I really think you need to go see a gynecologist. So I'm not going to give you your insulin prescription until you go to a gynecologist. And she says, but I don't want to consent to a gynecologist. And he says, well, then no insulin for you. Or you can go find another doctor to prescribe it. She's like, but I need it today or I'm going to die. He says, well, make the appointment with the gynecologist then. Would we be okay with that? But he would tell him to go to an endocrinologist. Why would he tell him that? It's a girl. It's not a him. It's a lady who needs insulin. And the doctor says, well, before I give you insulin, I want you to go to the gynecologist. She says, why? He says, well, because you haven't seen one in 7 years and it's important to get checked out. She says, yeah, but I need my insulin. And he goes, well, then go to the gynecologist. I don't want to consent to that, get an insulin. Okay, fine, I consent to it. That's not consent, right? That's blackmail. It's holding something hostage. I don't do it is what it is, okay? I am God's fiery sword. Think of the song Gregory in Disguise. He's Gregory in disguise. He hates the lies, wants to confront the men, always telling them. But every time he tries, they always run and hide. Again, he is denied the chance to yell at them. That's a lament of my life. I'm playing shit correctly, being decent, assuming the best. Some fucktard pulls some complete bullshit, and I go to confront them and hold them accountable, and they run away from me. The good news is that won't happen here because I'm paying for 25 minutes worth of yelling at him. I'm not talking about a psychiatrist, KE. I'm saying, what if the doctor who prescribes insulin to the diabetic determines it would be in the diabetic's best interest to go to a gynecologist because she hasn't been to one in a long time? And he decides to leverage his control over her access to insulin to force her to go to a gynecology appointment that she otherwise wouldn't consent to. That's the scenario we're talking about. There's no psychiatrist involved at all. It's an analogy that hopefully clarifies for you why this is a problem. Do I have any junk food quotes that I like? If you're eating healthy food, fuck you. That's my quote, okay? Hey, healthy food eaters, fuck off. If not healthy, shut up. You don't need like more pebbles and twigs. Just eat a fucking hamburger. Shut up. My quote's that. Okay, at this point, you seem to be really grasping at straws. I'm not expecting Dr. Ingram to know everything about everything. That's why I've not asked him to prescribe any drugs that require anything other than self-reporting from the patient. So, as I've explained, albuterol is always prescribed predicated on self-reporting. In other words, prescription of albuterol is supervenes upon the patient saying they have wheezing, asthma-ish effects. There is no physical test to administer. The patient gets prescribed albuterol, even if they're not having an asthma attack in front of the doctor, and the doctor has no evidence they have a wheezing issue. So, accordingly, that's within the purview of Dr. Ingram because it doesn't require any kind of testing that one would get at the doctor. That's why I felt comfortable asking him for it. Similarly, Viagra. It's only and always prescribed via self-reporting. So he's a doctor who doesn't have the mechanisms to do tests, right? So it would be unreasonable, pushing his boundaries unfairly by me, if I were to ask him to prescribe a drug that's predicated on a diagnosis that's made according to empirics rather than self-reporting. You understand? Well, they might test your lungs all they want, but if you're not wheezing, then they're prescribing the albuterol based on your self-reporting. So it's like, I went to the this fucking doctors, right? One time, I went to this doctor for something, like in El Monte or something, and he told me that this was like, I don't know, 20 years ago or something, 15 years ago. He told me that I was in the early stages of emphysema and I needed to go see a lung specialist. I went to see the lung specialist, who did a bunch of these lung tests on me and informed me that I had a well above average lung capacity and I tested much better on all the tests than your average non-smoker. There was nothing wrong with my lungs. I had no emphysema whatsoever, nor any signs of it. The first doctor was lying to me because he believed he knew the impact of that was to dissuade me from smoking, and that was good from his perspective. Instead, he was just being an idiot. An idiot. He didn't factor in the actual, rippling effects. Number one, it makes me trust doctors less. And next time a doctor tells me something, if it's true, I'm going to think he's crying wolf too. Number two, I'm going to be telling the story because I've spent all the time on the internet talking about things, and it'll make other people not trust doctors as well. Number three, he's wasting my money sending me to a lung specialist that tells me there's absolutely nothing wrong with my lungs. In fact, they're extra good. It was an irresponsible abdication of his actual professional responsibilities of the absolute worst sort. He didn't care about what his words did to the patient. He didn't care about the fact that I'm thinking, oh shit, I'm gonna die. It's like the arrogance, the presumption, the hubris required for a doctor to do that shit. Or like the doctor that was my dad and fucking lied to me, showing an EKG and said this indicates he needs to go to the emergency room. And when I actually pressed her on it and said, well, what exactly does it indicate and where and how and why? She had no answer for me and just told me that she was the expert. So I should just listen to her professional medical advice. But I mean, obviously I shouldn't listen to her at that point. She had just lied to me about the EKG. It's like Dr. Marco needs to understand something. He's the best doctor I can imagine. And so it turns out that he too is basically a piece of shit. Then obviously I will never try to tell the truth to a doctor again. Every time I encounter a doctor, I'm thinking, how can I game this to get the result I want? Because doctors can't be trusted at all. They're just there to rip you off, to semi-force you to endure a bunch of shit you don't want to endure and charge you for it. And then get mad when you tell them what you do want because it's not your job to want things or know what's good for you because they're so fucking stupid and presumptuous. So, obviously he's going to get in big trouble. And we'll see what happens. You will all find out. Unfortunately, it's not for another 3 weeks. So it'll be a while. I'll probably be still fucking musing and fuming and etc. about this for quite a while longer because, I trusted him. And if there's one thing I cannot stand, it's when people lie to me. In 0 instances is the other person's idea of what I should hear preferable to the most accurate truth, right? It happens a lot of time when I ask a simple question and whatever, they give me the answer that they think, oh no, I don't want to give that answer. That answer is going to make me mad. There's a decent chance that that answer will not make me mad, and I'll be perfectly fine with it because I'll recognize it as you're telling the truth and you're being responsible, answering my questions, etc. I will do the judgment at the end. You don't get to know what that process is. That's my business. But if you lie to me in the process, nothing makes me madder, I don't think. Well, I mean, except for Kimberly. Kimberly made me fucking want to just drop nuclear bombs on things. She made me so furious. But as a general thing, nothing makes me madder than when people lie to me. There's no reason to lie to me. I'm not going to use the truth against you if, in fact, you did something bad or whatever, and the truth is like, I fucked up, then I'm not going to use that against you either, even. I'm just going to say, well, all right, cool. We all just say, you proved yourself a decent human being because you listened to me. I was right and you acknowledged it. You were wrong and you acknowledged it. And you gave me some explanation for your ulterior motive that you acknowledged did not justify your behavior. So now I can return to trusting you. I know that you're not a shitbag. Or I find out that, in fact, I cannot trust him. And I realize I was ill-advised to place my trust in him. And he fooled me. I don't know. The thing is, it's like, if you're going to try to fire me as a patient, is he also going to fire Rachel as a patient? And if not, what will he do if during Rachel's appointment I walk in and say, oh, it's that cowardly shitbag? What's he going to do? Then he going to fire Rachel as a patient? Does he expect me not to do that if he fires me as a patient? Because firing me as a patient is essentially him saying, him being the guys who always run and hide, and again deny me the chance to yell at them. In other words, in this case, it's not a chance to yell at him exactly. It's a chance for him to prove to me that he's in fact trustworthy by, doing all things one needs to do when one fucks up. So that's just how it goes. That's how his cookie crumbles. There are a couple possibilities, but he does not get to avoid one of those possibilities. All right, crib tour. This is our living room. Let me turn this around. This is our living room. And it's pretty cool living room. It's got these really comfortable chairs. That lamp, I broke the lampshade on. And that chair's fine. My bass amp and stuff like that. And the big TV. And then there's this horrible thing. Oh, ceiling fan? Get out of here. Then we're in the foyer. Hello, foyer. Hi. I'm foyer. Why did you say hello to yourself then? It's my affectation. When people come in, I say, hello, foyer. This fan is cool because this fan was original to the house, unlike that horrible ceiling fan. Now, we'll look at the dining room. This is the dining room. It's also called the mail table because that's where we put the mail. This is a hallway. That is a cat. This is a bathroom with the best and most powerful flush in history. I always use this toilet because it's the best toilet in the house. This is the tech closet. Inside here, this is under the stairs. So, and this is where like the router is and shit like that. This is our central heating and air conditioning thing. Currently, the heater is set to 69 degrees. That's pretty pleasant. This is the pantry. It contains such items as Progresso chicken and wild rice soup and quart freezer bags. Now, this closet is a special closet, the kind of closet everyone wants to look into. It has vacuum stuff in it, just these tubes, because we have a whole house vacuum. You plug that tube into here, it starts the vacuum, and then it vacuums out to the thing in the garage. This is the cat again. You may remember him from a previous shot. This is the master bedroom. This is a place where we sleep. Well, I mean, Rachel, often after I go to sleep, will go upstairs and sleep in her room or do whatever up there. These are our curtains. They're very effective, and it's very dark in here even during the day if everything's closed. This is a closet. Those are my overalls. Next to them is that dumb blue pair of sweatpants. I don't really like them much. This is the other closet in here. There's some of my hats, like my clothes and stuff. This is the master bath. This is where I take a shower, but I don't usually use that toilet ever. It's got a mirror. It's got a bunch of like Rachel's makeup stuff there. She likes to use that to make her appearance slightly different. In here, we have something that rhymes with the squandry school. That's right, it's the laundry room. This is our hamper filled with clothes. That's Rachel's special drying rack for clothes that don't go in the dryer, I guess. This is a cabinet thing, and this is our washer and dryer. And then we have all these cabinets here to put stuff in. A lot of cabinet space. Here's the attic up here. Would you like to go to the attic? Let's take a look. Let's take a quick look. I actually need to go. I need to put that back in the attic, so I might as well go put it. Come on. Come on, attic. Oh. Oh. There you go. That's a good attic. Attic. I'm a ladder, not an attic. You're part of the attic as far as I'm concerned, ladder. So just get over yourself. You're not your own country. I keep telling you that. You're just a resident of attic land. I don't live there. I just stay there most of the time. Sometimes I'm down here. I'm in the laundry room. Why can't I have laundry room citizenship? Ladder, I'm tired of arguing with you about your status, okay? Deal with it. All right, we're going to turn the light on up there, and I'll get you so you can see. Boo, 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 boo. Boo, 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 boo. This is the attic. Look at that spooky rope there. It's like a hanging rope. So, you know, it's got stuff up here, insulation and stuff. And here's the light switch. Let's turn it off. Pow. Okay, now let's go back down the ladder. Now we're back on the ground. Time to put the ladder away. Hey, but I want to stay here in the laundry room. Ladder, you do not live here. No, I do live here. Ask the floor. We just moved in together. The floor does not have the power to move you into the laundry room. I'm sorry. But I don't want to go there. It's just dark and cold. Sorry, ladder. Off you go. Anyway, that ladder gives me a lot of lip when I want to go in the attic usually. Out here we have the garage. As you see, it's got a lot of cabinets and stuff. Plenty of storage space. It's got a garage door. There's this little buggy. There's the other garage door. You can see that shiddly pudding cat door. That's my, crap work, but poorly done handiwork, you might say. This thing here is the whole house vacuum. So when you plug those tubes in to any of these holes, you plug one into this one too, then it just automatically starts up. It sucks all the stuff into there, and then every once in a while empty it into the trash can. Pretty cool, pretty convenient. This is a nice big garage, plenty of room to do whatever. I don't really do much in there except sometimes smoke in there when it's cold. And here, Rachel's sweeping. I guess she wants the kitchen to look a little better before I show it to you. We keep the kitchen reasonably clean. I cleaned it just the other day. Or the counters anyway. This is the kitchen. There's the dishwasher, the stove. This is our sink. We actually got a new sink recently because the old one was leaking. This one turns from side to side, and this pulls out. It's a much better sink. This is this little table. I'm going to take that off and move it away. I don't want that there anymore. This is a trash compactor that we never used. It does work, but we've never used it. And this is our refrigerator. It holds food that needs to be cold. I'll take that trash out in a little bit.
Sure.
Next, we're gonna go upstairs.
Should we go food shopping tomorrow?
You think?
I mean, I think, yeah.
Yes, because we have no food. I mean, we have food that I could make, like we have sausages and hamburgers and stuff, but we barely have any bread.
Oh.
And we have no frozen meals. And we do have cheese and salami, but mostly what we need are frozen meals.
Yeah.
And breakfast pastries, milk.
You know.
We need everything.
Yeah.
Except meat. We don't need. I don't think chicken, sausage, and burgers, and we certainly don't need bacon.
Yeah. So because it's Christmas Eve tomorrow, I'm thinking we should go on like the earlier side.
Okay. Whenever you want.
11 or 12 maybe.
Yeah, whenever you're ready, just say let's go, and we'll go.
I'll set an alarm for myself then.
Okay. Tomorrow's Christmas Eve, huh?
Yeah.
I guess Santa must be in quite the frantic mode, trying to finish last minute things. Like, I hear he for a while anyway, it was over 200,000 pieces of coal short for the year. This is the upstairs. You can see that fan there now. That window just looks out from upstairs. You can't get to it to look at it really. These lamps are real. They work. You have oil in them, and you light the wick, and they provide light. And if in fact the power is out, that can be very handy. This is what we call the blue room. It's called the blue room because of the blue stuff in here. The drapes are blue, the bed's blue. As you see, Rachel's getting some clothes ready for putting away because they're summer clothes, I think.
They're, no, she gave away.
Oh, give away? Okay, we'll take a freaking sign first and just give it to her.
I was wondering if you up here.
I don't know.
No.
This is Rachel's room. And her bed, and she's got this cool big mirror in here.
Yeah.
That we brought from my parents' house. It's been in my family forever. This is the upstairs bathroom. It's just a regular old bathroom. You know, just got your shower, your toilet, your mirror, and then of course your assemblage of Rachel's girl stuff. She has the same setup in the downstairs bathroom too. She's got that right side of the sink filled with little arrangements of girl stuff like makeup and shit like that. Ooh, Q-tips. This is the only place in the house we have Q-tips, so when I'm up here I like to grab a couple of them. I don't Q-tip my ears as often as I would if in fact... Well, there's Capio. Hi, sweetheart. How's it going? I was trying to bother you, don't worry. I'm just coming in here to show. Yeah, she's in the black room. We call this the black room because this is black and that bed thing is black. And this room kind of cool because look, you can't see it, but looks out into the tree, like to the high up in the tree. You know? So you kind of feel like you're a squirrel. This has a closet as well, where we basically store like extra blankets and pillows and things. And that is all of the inside of the house. We will additionally walk around the walkway. Maybe I could turn on the light on this and walk around the outside even. So, as you see here, when we go outside, this is the front of the house. There's the garage. This is where I store the trash cans. I know it's an ugly place to keep them, but when I kept them on the deck, it was just a little further to go, and I just thought, like, fuck it. And here's the rest of the walkway. Here's our driveway. It's a circle driveway. It goes through there and around over there. And that's our hose. It's one of many hoses we have. I could go over here, but I don't think you'll be able to see because of the darkness. I don't know if you've been updated, but apparently now they don't make it so you can see when it's pitch dark. So you gotta use a light. What happened to my night vision powers? I say, well, the new patch came out and they were deemed OP. They were taken away. This is our deck. This is like, that's the laundry room right there. That's the garage right there. This is the master bedroom. This is our extra trash can. And this is our hill. It's my dead weed plants that I harvested a long time ago that I haven't cut them down yet. This is our, like, rocks to walk on, or whatever you call it. This is a piece of cement. There's some broken chairs that I need to throw away. That's the tree that room looks out into up there, you know. There's the kitchen. This is this dumbass extra shed that I don't want. We have a full-size shed down there. That's the propane thing. And this is the kitchen door. But I don't think we can go in through here, maybe? Let's find out. Oh, it's locked. So we'll have to go in the way we came out over here. I might be able to give you a little bit of a view of the front of the house before we go back in, but probably won't be able to see it very well because it's nighttime. You can see the bottom, but you can't really see the top floor that well. Yeah, it's not a very satisfying view of things. Say, Letty. Unfortunately, you chose to ask for a crib tour in the darkness of nighttime. And accordingly, I can't really show you the front of the house in full because too much darkness. Too much darkness, too few eyeball light receptors. And that completes the crib tour. Wow, ma! You don't talk about ma. Well, you're not part of the house, Tiffany. I know. I'm the owner of the house. No, Tiffany, I am the owner of the house. I found us. Therefore, it belongs to me. She's right. It does belong to her. No, she's not right. Mindy, just stay out of this. I am probably an intuitive feeler, but was that TI blinded thing. You know, maybe you missed the headlines, but the Nazis are actually gone. They were defeated in World War II. Did you think they had won? Nah, Holmes. Nazis didn't win. They lost to America. The score was 1,000,000 us. Fuck them. Thank you, Professor Hernandez, for that stirring lecture. Cross, what did you take away from that? Yes, Maureen. That America killed Hitler. Exactly. We killed him, and then we throw him into the dumpster. Are they still Nazis? No, Maureen, there are no more Nazis, okay? That's your. I think I met a Nazi. No, Maureen. They stopped in like 1946. Are you not paying any attention? Um, 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 I gotta go online and ask Eric. My name's Coin Boy. Weed. Is it true? If you have bipolar, you should avoid getting high? Not necessarily. That was, in fact, that notion was kind of central to this colluded abuse that Rachel was subjected to for a long time. Instead of actually treating her bipolar with the proper medication combination, the clinic she was at continued to treat her for years for cannabis addiction. And she'd get in trouble if she tested dirty for weed and stuff. Even though she has bipolar mania, they tried to treat her genuine mental illness with talk therapy for addiction. You lied on one question on that thing? What is that? It's a golden waffle with a hairdryer standing up against a background of red drapes with, the golden waffle is climbing out of the bath. Behind the bath is, I guess, a red drape. It's like a bath that stands in the middle of the room, and only one side of it has a drape in front of it. Eric had asked me to recall a story where I forgot something. It's a waffle. Does evil plan to upend Eric turn out? Who is evil plan to upend Eric? Let's see what's going on here about that. Curious. So anyway, once Rachel was properly treated, when she wasn't properly treated, she smoked a lot of weed. And her inadequate treatment, in other words, her iffy mental health, was blamed on her smoking weed. In reality, if they had listened to her and prescribed her the drugs she said were effective, then she probably wouldn't have been so poorly treated. And when I handpicked the doctor that I thought would be good, a cash-only psychiatrist, he had her all fixed in a couple of visits, and it was like a light switch. All of a sudden, I got to see fully sane, normal Rachel, really for the first time. What are you doing, you horrible selfish old bot? I'm talking on the live stream, Tiffany. Well, could you stop it, please? I'm trying to stand here with Monday and not have to listen to you. Well, Tiffany, just let me do my thing. Your thing's dumb. You know what? That's kind of mean. Listen, I'm trying to make you feel bad, but you're just talking and talking. I know, Tiffany, I like to talk. You know what I like to do? What? Find things. Yeah, okay, well, there's nothing to find here, alright? Let's see here. What's going on? Let's see, I couldn't believe,
Okay, I got what Kay says here. I read that. It's my head. I didn't read it out loud. I couldn't believe he thought we would all buy into that. It was so darn obviously an attempt to defend his inexcusable behaviors. What were you talking about? I'm so curious about this now. Hmm. I'm thinking, wondering. Uh-huh. I just don't understand what's going on. So, Fly Guy said, I wonder how he's doing, but I don't know who he's talking about. I am on live chat. And then he says, did his evil plan to upend Eric turn out? And then Winston's mom says, if Fly Guy hasn't posted in ages, I kind of feel bad that he never found an audience. He has those performing dad vibes. Are you talking about Club ENTP? I couldn't believe he thought we would all buy into that. It was so darn obviously an attempt to defend his inexcusable behaviors. He must be talking about Club ENTP. He did settle down a bit later. I think he had his FI panties in a bunch. Well, he drew some totally erroneous conclusions about things. Like, his name is Dan Rupp. So, what was I gonna say? I don't know. From what I've been told, weed can trigger manic episodes. Yet, some people do it and report being fine. Well, I had weed trigger a panic attack in me one time. It was shortly after my dad's suicide, and I was panicking about my aunt committing suicide too. You know, the panic attack was weird. I've never been quite so crippled by something other than like the K hole. You know, Eric's been painting for 20. Yeah, you got a lot of paint on you. So I wouldn't say anything. We're close to 20 hours, but I did get 2 full gallons of paint up on the wall, which is pretty good. Carlos is saying what? Let me see what he's saying. Yeah, I know I need to do better self care. I'm not worried about the vitamin D. I occasionally take multivitamins. I should get some exercise. And these things would help me. And it would help Rachel too, all those things too. But, you know, we're working our way towards taking care of some shit that we need to take care of. After that, maybe I can do a little bit better in terms of the SI self care stuff. As it is, I kind of feel like I'm doing better in terms of the SI self care stuff because going and doing all that painting and putting down the tarps and stuff, it was a bit of a workout. Somehow the psychotic side of the condition wasn't worsened at that time, which it usually is with weed. And hating chemicals from pain. I mean, I wasn't inhaling very many chemicals from pain. I was in the living room. The heater was on. It was sucking air in and stuff like that. And it didn't smell that much, and it was fine. You know, contemporary, best quality Dunn Edwards paint. I'm not worried about, um, consequences of huffing. I'm not trying to smell it, and it doesn't smell that much anyway. Now I'm morbidly curious. Surely karma will strike me down for this. So you're not wrong. I'm fully aware of those things. Like, for example, I'm well aware that I need to eat more salad. It's good for my digestive system and stuff. Unfortunately, it's difficult for me to eat salad because I need to get my teeth fixed. And of course, I went to the dentist to get my teeth fixed, and he tells me before I can get my teeth fixed, I need to get tested for diabetes. It's this Kafka-esque nightmare. Running is dumb. Maybe that woman's husband got a hold of him. Oh, Marty. Marty's horrible. He's as toxic as you get. Friend got me a $200 oscilloscope from an electronics company that was shutting down for only $20. Fly guy loves running. Well, you must be healthy then, I guess. I love sitting on my ass and pulling my rips and talking to you about it. I love dewdrops in the spring, the whisper of the wings of a butterfly. I love the tenderness of a gentle touch on a cold winter's night. What we're going to do, I mean, the thing is, running is the only exercise to do, really, because when I do exercise, I haven't really since I've been up here, but I have historically throughout my life periodically gone on a jog, which for me is start running and then start running as fast as you can for as long as you can until you're completely exhausted and out of breath and you can't go any further and going, and then you walk home and you're done. That's the only way to make sure you get a quick workout and you have to run for a little bit of time. Everything catches up eventually. I mean, some things are perpetually slower than you. I'll tell you what will never outrun me or catch up to me or anything like that. A fish. Why? Because I have the absolute advantage of the land barrier. If a fish wants to catch up to me, he can only begin to do so as long as I'm in the water. Once there's the shore, bam, guaranteed victory. So, no, not everything can catch up to you.
I think you're a special guy.
Thanks, beautiful. I think you're a special lady.
Thanks, I love you.
I love you too. I feel like I could use a bite of food, like a cheese or something. Could you give me a cheese?
Yeah, sure. You want? Is there salami too? You want
I
salami?
don't want salami. I just want cheese. Okay, you get out of here with your good advice and emotional intelligence. I feel like getting called emotionally intelligent is like getting called stupid. I mean, I don't feel that way. I respect and admire in a way like I can just kind of grok sort of what's going on, but I can sense that, this is very deft and considered without having any clear sense of what that means necessarily. I tend to respect it. Like, KE is not FI. So, she's not FI1, she's not FI2. I just don't think she's FI at all. Like, when I was talking about the doctor thing earlier, she would spend the whole time advocating against my understanding of things and not making the kind of arguments that an FI tool person, for example, would ever make. Thank you, darling.
You're welcome. Do you only want one?
Yeah, I was fine.
Okay.
I'm gonna eat any of this coming to bed pretty soon. I can feel myself like, whoa.
Are you gonna go to bed soon?
Yeah.
Okay, I wanna lay with you before. Well, I gotta take my medicine.
I mean, I typed her with ENTP. I see no reason to change that. Her contrarian nature and prioritization of it, she be the gauge of all knowing and determiner of what ideas are right. Very ENTP-ish. I mean, what has she done that indicates good at FI at all? You're saying she's not FI poor. I mean, so what you're saying is she's not TI tool? Remember, there's no test that will tell you definitively polar FI. So, if, for example, you're telling me you thoroughly tested her TI and it just was pretty weak. Okay, well, that's a good warrant for some other alpha quadra thing, but I mean, apparently that's not the results I got. I don't remember testing her really, but I've not seen anything inconsistent with the typing. She's very regularly contrarian and seems to always float a position in a way that says, no, this is what there is to say about that. In a very ENTP fashion. You can see here, she has compelled the chat and me to discuss her type. I normally don't discuss her type at all. I just know she's an ENTP and that she's a contrarian who doesn't like to be understood so clearly, and so fights against the definitiveness of typology, tries to find examples, counterexamples for her negation, etc. Like all ENTPs, she wants it to be her idea. It's not her idea, it's not my idea either, so it's fine. I'm about to go to bed, Stuart Johnson. I can just feel myself like, I feel like a self-deassembling, reassembling robot who's about to enter into the self-deassembling phase. That's what I feel like. I feel like Mr. Sandman putting some sand into my eyes. It is so grand. I wish some sand would be on my face too. Oh, Mr. Sandman, rub your sand all through. Sandman. That's called homoerotic Mr. Sandman. Ooh, you already said whoops. Did I also say there it is? With more practice, you will be like me one day. I don't like typology on principle. It's not just about being understood clearly or not. No, I didn't say it was about being understood. I think you don't like typology because you reject the idea that any box, no matter how accurate, could possibly be accurate for you because you're KE, you're too complicated for that. Too sophisticated to be constrained by the limits of a given label. If anything, I wish people understood me more clearly. Mostly they just don't. Because their own self-perception stands in the way of But you want them to understand you more clearly as an individual, unique individual KE. You don't want them to be able to understand you by some description of a non-existent average example of the thing. So in other words, you don't like the fact that in the real world, somebody who truly understands typology like I do, if somebody informs them that you're an EHP, they can know a lot about you before you even meet them. In your opinion, you can always surprise everybody. How much do you sleep? Well, it depends on the day. I'm gonna go to sleep pretty soon. I try to sleep as much as possible when I do go to sleep. I tend to stay up too much after I wake up. And it would be wonderful if tonight I just slept straight through from 1:30 a.m. here, or maybe like 2 a.m. by the time I go to bed, all the way straight around through to 2 a.m. again. That'd be fantastic. Random TI questions like, if your chicken has an egg and the egg is red, then what? If a chicken lays an egg, then what? That's the question you have. You don't think we approach things the same way? I mean, we approach ideas the same way. I mean, you have your own strategies that you use that, obviously you're not going to be as developed as I am in those areas, but whatever. I don't want to argue. I don't care what type you are. One thing you can frequently be, regardless of your type, is a pain in the ass. And that's fine. We love having a pain in the ass. If I didn't have a pain in the ass, I wouldn't be reminded that I had an ass at all. So, you keep being you. You keep saying things that are negations of other things. You keep saying things like, meh, 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 with a tone that says, I am the one with the truth. I, K-E, am privy to these important wisdoms. That silly Eric, he kept pretending he had wisdom when he knew in his heart that he had K-E right here, ready to really jack out the wisdoms. Oh, I'm falling asleep. Okay, I'm going to end the stream because I'm falling asleep. Good night, everybody. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese. Turn off. Pew.